What's up, folks? This is a request video for none other than MsPOOFILICIOUS. She's a big heavy metal fan, rock and roll fan, and she hit me up with a request because I hadn't done any videos that she's seen about what kind of bands I was into and where I started loving rock and roll and all those kind of things. So she had a whole little list of questions, but I kind of put this video off because I know there's probably going to be about 200 bands that I forget all about until it's over, and everybody's going to say, what about these guys, and these guys? Haven't you ever heard of these? Yes, I have. But I'm just going to have to narrow it down. There were certain albums growing up that were huge, certain songs that were huge. I'm the type of guy that I like a big range of things, but I'll get into an album and I'll play the shit out of it for months. And I will listen to other stuff, but it just stays in my fucking CD changer. So, that being said, there are certain songs that were with me like through an entire summer. And whenever I hear that album, any one of those songs, it'll remind me of that summer. But let's rewind for a minute back to the beginning. Growing up and being very young, I always remember Dream On from Aerosmith. That was one of the earliest songs I remember. My mother was really into Jim Croce. And I don't know, I wouldn't really call it rock. It'd be closer to folk music, but it was good stuff, and it still sounds good to this day. And it always takes me back to a very early time when things were very simple. And Mom had records, that was back when we had record players and 8-tracks. And Mom had all the Jim Croce records. And I always loved Jim Croce, and I still like to listen to him from time to time because it's good stuff. He was a good singer-songwriter. And, he was killed in a plane crash early on in his career, and like a lot of greats, it was too soon, and it was a big loss. But I'll never forget the first song that truly made me fall completely in love with rock and roll. And I was in grade school. I hate to sit here and date myself and tell everybody how fucking old I am, but Jump from Van Halen off the 1984 album, huge fucking album for me. That song would come on the radio, man. I had my fucking little Walkman on. Remember Walkmans? Little Sony Walkmans? That song was on like every fifth song that played on the radio. Every rock station had it on there all the time. Just the intro. You'd hear that fucking keyboard kick in. Oh, yeah. That's my song. And everybody loved that song. And the killer fucking solo. Eddie Van Halen was a badass on guitar. David Lee Roth, he was huge front man, very charismatic. The dude had a stage presence like none other. Of course, you can go back and watch now. It's like, it's kind of flamboyant there, Dave. But in his prime, and in that time, videos were pretty new. So, it didn't matter that they were cheesy because it was new. Nobody had anything to compare it to. But David Lee Roth was a pimp. All the women wanted him. You look at it now and you think it's pretty silly. How the fuck was it? Why was he wearing that shit? And why was he doing some of the shit he was doing? But the dude was a pimp. All the chicks wanted him. He was a hell of a singer, a hell of a front man. All the dudes wish they could be just like him and pull half the poon he was. That was Van Halen's prime, and it kicked ass. And even after Van Halen split up and he did his own thing, I remember going to school, and in the fucking lunchroom, they had a jukebox. Oh, yeah. It was fucking badass because, they had bands like Great White, which is a killer fucking band. And that was, remember, Rock Me from Great White? Well, at the same time, Yankee Rose was huge. Great White was always getting played all the time. Whitesnake, Guns N' Roses just came out that year. That was a huge, it was when Appetite for Destruction came out. Huge fucking band. Loved them. Motley Crue was huge back then. That's when the Girls came out. The Wild Side album came out. It was badass. Motley Crue was always big. They're still out there kicking ass. I always liked them. Rat was huge. They kind of followed that glam rock thing like just about every band did back then. That was just mainstream, and if you wanted to sell records, that's what you did. And Rat, to me, that was baby-making music. For many years after that, shit, have somebody come over, throw some Rat on, just listen to the lyrics and the beat, shit, and fuck. It was great, Of course, you can't forget about bands like fucking Queensryche or Cinderella or Skid Row. I mean, there's so many fucking bands. You know, Poison was big. Warrant was big. Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot. The list could go on. And I remember, and it's funny now because these guys are still around, Bon Jovi. I remember in 8th grade, Slippery When Wet was out. And that song was, I mean, that whole album, excuse me, not just song, the whole album kicked ass, and everybody loved him for that year. Then after that, suddenly it wasn't cool to like Bon Jovi anymore. Everybody was secretly listening to them. For some reason, I don't know, don't ask me why, but it just goes like that sometimes. This band kicks ass, and then you just kind of move on and forget about it. Let's not forget about Dangerous Toys either. A lot of kick-ass bands out there. Then, of course, you had bands that stood above the rest. They stood tall all by themselves. You know, solo artists like Ozzy Osbourne. I remember getting turned on to Ozzy, and it was killer as hell. Killer of Giants was the first Ozzy song, and I know he'd been out for years before that, but it was the first time that I really sat down and just listened to it. And that was the Ultimate Sin album. Killer of Giants, it was a killer song. It was pretty, if you think about it, the lyrics were written back in 86, and they're pretty relevant today for what's going on in our world today. It's pretty crazy. Check that song out if you don't know it. But, you know, from that point on, I listened to Ozzy, and I started backtracking, catching up, you know. Fucking loved Ozzy. And back then in the 80s and 90s, I don't know if you remember this or not, but being insane was like popular, being crazy and suicidal. The industry really kind of pushed that. I mean, they had a mystique about it, and everybody, ooh, he's psychotic, you know, so if he'd come out and just be crazier than hell, and it helped sell him records, you know. I mean, not to mention the music kicked ass. I mean, fuck. And Ozzy Osbourne got his start in Black Sabbath. Another Black Sabbath singer that went solo that kicked ass all the way to the end, and that was Ronnie James Dio. In my humble opinion, Ronnie James Dio came out with Holy Diver. To me, that was his best album, hands down, all the way through. Lock Up the Wolves was a pretty good CD as well, but I still think that Holy Diver was his best one. And when you heard the man sing, I mean, there's nobody else like him. Ronnie James Dio had a very distinct voice. Then, of course, for a while, you know, I always had my favorite band. And this was the old school Metallica. Old school Metallica, like all the way up till Injustice for All. Metallica was it. They were like the creme de la creme, the top-notch Metallica, you know. If you were around back then, you'll remember that. With the fucking Metallica jackets. I mean, that was it. Metallica kicked ass harder than anybody else. If you're a true fan, they were it. But eventually that stuff started to kind of wear on me, right? I started branching out, listening to other things. Another underrated band, a band that I still think kicks ass to this day, Megadeth. Megadeth kicked ass on a whole other level. And they got a lot of kick-ass songs, a lot of kick-ass albums. I was a huge, huge fan. Peace Sells, But Who's Buying, all the way up to Cryptic Writings. I know all those CDs, front to back, every word. Love those fucking albums, every one of them. Megadeth is huge. So, I mean, even if they had just stopped right there at Cryptic Writings, I mean, I would have been cool just listening to that same stuff over and over and over and over again, which I have. Kicks ass. I mean, it's really hard for me to pick one that I say is the best. For a lot of people say that they think Countdown to Extinction was the best, which was a kick-ass album. Anyways, I could do a whole video about Megadeth. They kicked ass. I found another band. Somebody that had been out for a little while, but I discovered a new band. They became a new favorite instantly. They were a breath of fresh air. They were exactly what I was looking for with the music. I loved it. The guitars were hard. The drums were fucking on point. And the vocals were amazing. This guy could scream. At that point in my life, as angry as I was as a young man, I was extremely angry. Can't imagine that, right? But I was very angry. When I'd hear this guy scream, it's like, man, that's how I feel on the inside. I just can't vocalize that. It was a band called Pantera. And I turned everybody on to Pantera that I knew. I force-fucked them into listening to this. You gotta check this fucking band out. And I got a lot of people hooked up listening to Pantera. And it was on from there. Pantera, hands down, was the best metal band of all times. Nobody could touch Pantera, period. They fucking crunched your fucking balls and slammed your fucking head into the concrete. These guys were fucking badasses, and they still are. But you know, metal is not the only thing that I listen to. I do appreciate some good blues. I like Kenny Wayne Shepherd. I mean, the reason I like him is because the way that he plays guitar sounds a whole lot like Stevie Ray. Stevie Ray, in my opinion, is the best blues guitar player that ever lived. Period. End of story. Stevie Ray Vaughan was a natural. I mean, it just came to him. It just flowed out of him. Most people don't have that. Although I say he is the best. Hands down, my top favorite blues musician of all time is Johnny Lang. The dude's got soul. I mean, he can play guitar like you wouldn't believe. The dude's got a voice. And it's hard for me to pick a great album of his that I like the best. Lie to Me was good. Wonder This World was good. And it's been a long time coming. It's all awesome albums. Love them. They're very bluesy. Definitely Wonder This World. Those first two albums. I mean, if you've ever had your heart ripped out of your chest, those are definitely two albums you could listen to and cry like a bitch to, because it's got so much soul in it and it speaks to you. You know, if you had a real serious heartbreak, man, if you don't want to cry like a bitch and get drunk and cry all over the place, then don't listen to it. Long time coming. Killer album's got some sad tunes in it too, but it's also got a lot of cool songs that maybe if you just fell in love and you're all ooey gooey and drunk off of it, drunk in love, you know what I'm saying? Just love drunk, high off of a bitch. That's got some really cool songs too. Shit you could play at your wedding, you know, good fucking shit. I kind of bouncing around all over the map here, folks. I mean, I was trying to really do my homework and remember back over the years of albums that really meant something to me. Of course, I skipped right over Suicidal Tendencies. I mean, they were funky as hell, man. They were badass. I remember the summer of '91 was a crazy, crazy, crazy summer. All my old school friends that were with me back then knew that that's pretty much all we played that entire summer. We had that cassette tape and kept flipping it and flipping it and flipping it and flipping it and flipping it. We ate so much acid that summer, and we drank so much booze that summer, and we fucked. And we played the fuck out of that album. People got their asses kicked. It was a wild fucking summer. More good times than bad. There was some devastation that summer. There was a level of loss that summer that we won't recover from. But before all that went down, we had a great time. And that was pretty much the soundtrack for that summer. And it kicked ass. But you know, I always have appreciated good music that I could feel. Music that made you feel something, music you could relate to. And I love good bluesy, good classic rock stuff. Bob Seger kicks ass. ZZ Top, I mean, come on. There's nobody else like ZZ Top. That's a good southern fucking bluesy rock and roll feel, man. It sounds good when you hear it. As soon as it kicks in, you know that's ZZ Top, and you listen to that shit because it sounds good. Now, what's cool about a lot of bands is that some of them I got to meet. Back in '99, I was working staff. You know, I was doing crowd control at concerts. I got to meet Gwar. See, here's a shot of me at the Gwar show. Yeah, look how young I look, man. Crazy. But I got to meet a lot of cool people doing that. And I got to see a lot of shows, System of a Down. I got to meet and watch Head PE a couple times. The Eminem show when he first came out, Slim Shady. I met Salt and Pepper. I met Vanilla Ice. I don't know if that's anything to really brag about, but I did meet him. Yes, and yes, he's goofier in person than he is on fucking TV, by far. Fear Factory, Seven Dust. Oh, man, I mean, I'm kind of drawing a blank, but there was a lot of people. Cowboy Junkies, Neville Brothers, Les and Jake. Oh, shit, man. That was back in '99, but it was really cool that, you know, I got to meet a lot of bands and see a lot of bands. Stuck Mojo. They always put on a hell of a show. I still think, hands down, the craziest show that I ever worked at and ever witnessed was the Gwar show. Man, I just walked soaked in shit. Walked out there just soaked in fake blood. and fake piss. I mean, it was just fucking ridiculous. I'll never forget it, looking out over a sea of maniacs, and everybody wore white so that blood would stain their shit. That was like their little trophy going home. And looking out over all these crazy kids, and they're all drenched in blood, and their strobe lights flashing on them, and they're jumping up, down, screaming their fucking heads off. Very fucking intense, man. Very intense fucking show, to tell you the least. You know, and I like bands like Saliva. Saliva's a badass fucking band. Shinedown. I like Seether. Well, folks, I could go on and on about music that I like and bands that I like, but I know I'm still going to forget about 100 different bands and 100 different singers, and you're going to think, how the fuck could you forget about them? But at the end of the day, folks, this video was for none other than MsPOOFILICIOUS, because she asked me to do it. I told her I'd do it. Young lady, I'm sorry if I forgot a bunch of cool people that you just knew that I would like. Anyways, we could definitely talk on PMs about more music if you want to. And I will catch up with y'all later. Peace.